Welcome to the Sleep Story Haven, your peaceful sanctuary where the whispers of ancient forests meet the gentle rhythm of moonlit shores. Here, time slows to the rhythm of your breathing. Worries dissolve like mist, and your mind finds the peace it's been seeking. Each story is crafted to guide you through enchanted landscapes and tranquil moments, designed to quiet your thoughts and prepare your spirit for deep, restorative sleep. So find your most comfortable position, close your eyes, and let tonight's gentle tale carry you to the peaceful dreams that await. Welcome to your Sleep Story Haven. Take a deep breath and let our story begin. The thermal springs of ancient Rome. Chapter 1: The Wanderer's Arrival. The sun hung low over the 7 hills of Rome, casting long shadows across the cobblestone streets as Marcus made his way through the ancient city. His footsteps echoed softly against the weathered stones, each step carrying him further from the noise and bustle of the forum, toward something he could not yet name, but desperately needed. The weight of countless sleepless nights pressed upon his shoulders like a heavy cloak, and his eyes, rimmed with exhaustion, searched the horizon for a sign of the peace that had eluded him for so long. Marcus had heard whispers in the marketplaces. Gentle murmurs passed between merchants and citizens about a place where the earth itself offered healing. The thermal springs, they said, where emperors once sought solace, and where the very waters held the power to wash away the burdens of the world. These springs lay nestled in a valley beyond the city walls, accessible only to those who truly sought restoration of both body and spirit. As he walked, the familiar sounds of Rome began to fade behind him. The clatter of cart wheels on stone, the calls of vendors hawking their wares, the constant hum of conversation, all of it gradually dissolved into a gentler symphony. The air itself seemed to change as he moved away from the dense heart of the city, becoming softer, carrying with it subtle fragrances of wild herbs and flowering vines that grew along the ancient aqueducts. The path Marcus followed was well worn, but not crowded. Others had walked this way before him, seeking the same elusive gift of rest that he now pursued. The road wound gently downward, bordered by tall cypress trees whose dark green branches swayed in the evening breeze. Their movement created a soft, rustling sound, like whispered prayers or ancient lullabies carried on the wind. With each step, Marcus felt something within him beginning to soften. The tight knot of tension that had lived in his chest for months started to loosen ever so slightly. His breathing, which had been shallow and quick for longer than he could remember, began to deepen. The rhythm of his footsteps on the path created a steady, meditative beat that seemed to synchronize with his heartbeat, drawing him into a state he had almost forgotten existed, a state of simple presence in the moment. The landscape around him grew more beautiful with each passing mile. Olive groves dotted the hillsides, their silver-green leaves catching the last rays of sunlight and reflecting it back in gentle sparkles. Vineyards stretched across terraced slopes, heavy with grapes that would soon be harvested. The earth here felt different somehow, richer and more alive, as if it held within its depths some ancient secret of renewal and restoration. As the sun continued its descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in soft shades of rose and gold, Marcus began to notice subtle changes in the air around him. A faint warmth seemed to rise from the ground itself, and with it came a mineral scent, clean and pure, unlike anything he had encountered in the city. Steam, barely visible in the gathering dusk, drifted across the path in delicate wisps, carrying with it the promise of the healing waters that lay ahead. The sound of flowing water began to reach his ears, distant at first, but growing clearer with each step. It was not the harsh rush of a mountain stream or the rhythmic crash of ocean waves, but something gentler, the soft murmur of water moving over smooth stones, the quiet bubble and sigh of springs emerging from deep within the earth. This sound seemed to penetrate not just his ears, but his entire being, creating a resonance that touched something deep within his weary soul. Other travelers began to appear on the path, though they moved with a languid grace that spoke of their own journey toward peace. An elderly woman walked slowly, her weathered hands trailing along the stone wall that bordered the path, her eyes closed, as if she were already beginning to feel the healing power of this place. A young man sat beneath an olive tree, his back against its ancient trunk, breathing deeply of the mineral-scented air with a look of profound contentment on his face. None of these fellow travelers spoke, but their presence was comforting rather than intrusive. They seemed to understand, as Marcus was beginning to understand, that this journey required a certain quality of silence, a turning inward that made words unnecessary. Their quiet movements and peaceful expressions served as gentle reminders that he was not alone in his search for rest, that many others had walked this path before him and found what they were seeking. As the last light of day faded into twilight, Marcus crested a small hill and saw before him a sight that took his breath away. Spread out in the valley below lay the thermal springs of ancient Rome, more beautiful than any description could have prepared him for. Steam rose from pools of crystal clear water that reflected the emerging stars like mirrors made of liquid starlight. Marble columns and archways, weathered by centuries, but still majestic, framed the various pools and bathing areas. Soft light emanated from oil lamps placed along walkways and within niches carved into the stone, creating an atmosphere of sacred tranquility. The springs themselves were arranged in a natural progression, from smaller, more intimate pools near the entrance to larger, grander baths deeper within the complex. Ancient Roman engineering had enhanced rather than diminished the natural beauty of the site, channeling the thermal waters through carved channels and over delicate waterfalls that created a continuous, soothing soundtrack of flowing water. Marcus stood at the crest of the hill for a long moment, simply taking in the scene before him. He felt something shift within him, a recognition that he had indeed found what he was looking for. The springs seemed to call to him with a voice that bypassed his ears and spoke directly to his deepest need for rest and renewal. The warm glow of the lamps, the gentle steam rising from the heated pools, the soft sound of water finding its eternal path, all of it combined to create an environment that felt like a sanctuary removed from time itself. As he began his descent into the valley, Marcus noticed that his steps had become slower, more deliberate. The urgency that had driven him for so long was beginning to dissolve, replaced by a growing sense of anticipation mixed with profound relief. He was almost there. After months of searching for rest that seemed always to elude him, he was finally approaching a place where such rest was not only possible, but inevitable. The path wound down through carefully tended gardens, where night-blooming flowers released their fragrances into the warm air. Jasmine and lavender, rosemary and sage, the scents blended and mingled, creating a natural aromatherapy that seemed designed to calm the mind and ease the spirit. Marcus found himself breathing more deeply, drawing these healing fragrances into his lungs and feeling them work their subtle magic on his tense and weary body. Ancient olive trees, their trunks gnarled and twisted with age, stood as silent sentinels along the pathway. Their presence spoke of endurance and patience, of the slow, steady growth that comes not from struggle, but from deep roots and trust in the natural rhythms of life. Marcus placed his hand on one of these ancient trunks as he passed, feeling the rough bark beneath his palm and drawing strength from its solid, unchanging presence. The temperature of the air continued to rise gently as he approached the springs themselves. It was not the oppressive heat of a summer day, but a welcoming warmth that seemed to embrace him, loosening muscles that had been tight for far too long, and encouraging his body to release the accumulated tension of countless difficult days and sleepless nights. At the entrance to the spring complex, Marcus paused before a simple stone arch adorned with carved figures of water nymphs and healing gods. The figures seemed to smile down at him with expressions of infinite compassion and understanding, as if they knew exactly what he had endured and what he hoped to find in this sacred place. Their stone eyes held a depth of wisdom that spoke of centuries of witnessing human suffering transformed into peace, of countless souls finding restoration in these blessed waters. Beyond the arch, a walkway of smooth marble led between the various pools and bathing areas. The stone was warm beneath his feet, heated by the thermal springs that flowed beneath it, and Marcus realized that even the ground here was designed to provide comfort and healing. Every element of this place had been created with one purpose in mind: to offer sanctuary to those who came seeking rest and renewal. As he walked along the marble pathway, Marcus began to understand that his journey was only beginning. The physical arrival at the springs was merely the first step in a process of healing that would unfold gradually, gently, in its own perfect time. He did not need to hurry or push or strive. He needed only to be present, to allow himself to receive the gifts that this ancient place was so ready to bestow upon him. The sound of the flowing water grew stronger and more complex as he moved deeper into the complex. It was not just one sound, but many. The soft splash of water cascading over marble lips, the gentle bubble of springs emerging from their underground sources, the quiet lap of heated water against stone sides of pools. These sounds wove together into a symphony of liquid music that seemed to penetrate his very bones, beginning the work of unwinding tension that had been carried for far too long. Marcus found himself walking more and more slowly, not from exhaustion, but from a growing desire to savor each moment, each sensation, each step of this journey toward the rest he had been seeking. The springs were calling to him now with a voice that grew stronger and clearer with each passing moment. And he knew that soon, very soon, he would answer that call and allow himself to sink into the healing waters that had waited so patiently for his arrival. The marble columns that supported elegant archways seemed to glow with their own inner light, enhanced by the soft illumination of the oil lamps, but possessing a luminosity that spoke of something deeper, more ancient, more sacred than mere architecture. These stones had witnessed the healing of emperors and commoners alike, had stood silent guard over countless moments of transformation and renewal. They held within their crystalline structure the memory of all the peace that had been found in this place, and they were ready to share that peace with anyone who came seeking it with an open heart. As Marcus approached the first of the thermal pools, he felt the last of his resistance beginning to melt away. The long journey was nearly over. The healing was about to begin. The thermal springs of ancient Rome lay before him, their waters warm and welcoming, their promise of restoration as certain as the sunrise that would eventually come to bless this sacred valley once again. Chapter 2: The Threshold of Healing. The first pool that Marcus encountered seemed to glow with an inner radiance that transcended the gentle illumination of the surrounding oil lamps. Steam rose from its surface in lazy spirals, carrying with it the distinctive mineral fragrance that spoke of deep earth and ancient healing. The water itself was the color of liquid crystal, so clear that he could see every detail of the marble floor beneath its surface, every carefully placed stone, and every delicate channel through which the thermal currents flowed. Around the pool's perimeter, smooth marble benches offered places for quiet contemplation. These seats, worn smooth by countless visitors over the centuries, radiated the same gentle warmth as the pathways, heated by the thermal springs that flowed beneath the entire complex. Marcus approached one of these benches and seated himself carefully, allowing his body to relax for the first time in memory as the warm stone embraced him with its patient, enduring comfort. As he sat in the soft light of the early evening, Marcus began to notice details that had escaped his attention during his approach to the springs. The pool before him was not perfectly round, but followed the natural contours of the rock formation from which the thermal waters emerged. Ancient Roman engineers had enhanced these natural features with carefully placed stones and marble, creating a harmonious blend of human artistry and natural beauty that honored both without diminishing either. Small niches carved into the surrounding walls held additional oil lamps, their flames dancing gently in the warm air and casting shifting patterns of light and shadow across the water's surface. These patterns seemed to move with a rhythm all their own, creating a mesmerizing display that drew the eye and quieted the mind. Marcus found himself watching these dancing lights with growing fascination, feeling his thoughts begin to slow and simplify as the visual rhythm worked its subtle magic upon his consciousness. The sound of the water was even more complex and beautiful than he had first realized. The main spring emerged from a natural grotto carved into the hillside, and the water bubbled forth with a gentle, rhythmic pulsing that seemed to echo the heartbeat of the earth itself. As this primary flow met the pool, it created a soft, continuous whisper that was joined by the quieter sounds of smaller springs and seeps that contributed their own voices to the aquatic chorus. Other visitors moved through the area with the same unhurried grace that Marcus had noticed on the path. An elderly gentleman in a simple white robe descended slowly into the pool, his movements careful and deliberate. As the warm water embraced his weathered frame, Marcus saw an expression of profound relief and gratitude cross his face. The man settled into a comfortable position in the pool and closed his eyes, allowing the healing waters to begin their ancient work of restoration and renewal. A middle-aged woman sat on the far side of the pool, her feet dangling in the warm water. She had a small earthenware cup in her hands, and Marcus realized that she was drinking the mineral water that bubbled up from a separate spring, designed specifically for that purpose. The expression on her face was one of quiet reverence, as if she were participating in a sacred ritual that connected her to countless generations of healers and seekers who had come before her. The clothing provided for visitors was simple and elegant, loose-fitting robes of natural linen that seemed to breathe with the body and move like water themselves. These garments, Marcus noticed, were placed on convenient hooks carved into the marble walls, along with soft towels woven from the finest cotton. Everything had been designed to support the experience of healing and rest, removing any obstacle or inconvenience that might disturb the delicate process of restoration. As Marcus continued to observe the scene around him, he began to understand that there was a natural rhythm to this place, an organic flow that guided visitors through their healing journey without any need for schedules or instructions. People seemed to know intuitively when to move and when to be still, when to soak in the waters, and when to rest on the warm marble benches, when to drink from the mineral springs, and when to simply breathe the therapeutic air. The architecture itself seemed to breathe along with the rhythms of the springs. Arched doorways framed views of distant pools and gardens, creating a sense of depth and mystery that invited exploration while never feeling overwhelming or demanding. Columns supported graceful vaults that allowed the steam to rise naturally while providing shelter from any possibility of wind or weather. Every element worked in harmony with every other element, creating an environment that felt both grand and intimate, both ancient and timelessly present. Marcus began to notice that his own breathing had synchronized with the rhythms around him. The gentle pulsing of the springs, the soft rise and fall of steam in the warm air, the quiet movements of other visitors, all of these had combined to create a natural tempo that his body seemed eager to match. His chest rose and fell with increasing slowness and depth, drawing the mineral-rich air deep into his lungs and releasing it in long, satisfying exhalations that carried away tension he hadn't even realized he was holding. The warmth that emanated from the thermal springs was unlike any heat he had ever experienced. It was not the sharp intensity of fire or the oppressive weight of summer sun. but a gentle, penetrating warmth that seemed to arise from the very core of the earth. This heat carried with it not just physical comfort, but something deeper, a sense of being held and supported by forces far greater and more ancient than any human concern or anxiety. As the evening progressed, Marcus began to feel drawn to enter the water himself. The initial hesitation that had kept him on the marble bench was slowly dissolving, replaced by a growing sense of trust and anticipation. He could see in the faces and movements of the other visitors that they had found something precious in these waters, something that went far beyond simple physical relaxation. Rising from the bench with movements that had become noticeably slower and more graceful, Marcus approached the changing area where the linen robes awaited. The simple act of removing his travel-worn clothing felt symbolic, as if he were shedding not just fabric, but all the accumulated stress and struggle of his recent experiences. The linen robe that he donned was incredibly soft against his skin, and it seemed to carry within its fibers the peace and tranquility of this sacred place. Returning to the pool's edge, Marcus paused for a moment to fully appreciate what lay before him. The water was perfectly clear and inviting, its temperature rising in gentle, visible currents that created subtle variations in the clarity and color of the liquid. These thermal currents were like highways of healing, carrying the earth's gifts upward and outward to embrace anyone who chose to receive them. The marble steps that led into the pool were worn smooth by countless feet, their surfaces polished to a gentle luster that spoke of the thousands of people who had descended these same steps in search of the same peace that Marcus now sought. As he placed his foot on the first step, he felt the warmth of the stone and water meet his skin with a sensation that was both surprising and deeply familiar, as if his body remembered this experience from some ancestral memory of healing and rest. The water embraced his foot with a gentle pressure that seemed to communicate directly with his nervous system, sending signals of safety and comfort throughout his entire being. As he continued his descent into the pool, step by careful step, Marcus felt layers of tension beginning to melt away like ice meeting warm spring sunshine. His shoulders, which had been raised and tight for months, began to settle into their natural position. His jaw, which he hadn't realized was clenched, started to relax and soften. By the time Marcus had settled into a comfortable position in the pool, with the warm water reaching to just below his chest, he felt as if he had crossed some invisible threshold. The world beyond the springs seemed to recede even further into the distance, becoming not just physically remote, but somehow less relevant, less urgent, less real than this moment of perfect present moment awareness in the healing waters. The mineral content of the water made his skin feel incredibly soft and smooth, while the heat penetrated deeply into his muscles and joints, addressing aches and tensions that he had carried for so long. He had almost forgotten they weren't supposed to be there. The water seemed to have its own intelligence, finding exactly the places where healing was most needed and concentrating its therapeutic effects precisely where they would do the most good. As Marcus settled more deeply into the pool, allowing the water to support his weight completely, he began to understand that his healing journey had truly begun. The thermal springs were not just a place of physical restoration, but a gateway to a deeper kind of peace, a rest that touched not just the body, but the mind and spirit as well. The ancient Romans who had built this sanctuary had understood something profound about the relationship between physical comfort and spiritual renewal. And they had created a place where both could flourish together in perfect harmony. The evening stars were beginning to appear in the darkening sky above, their light reflecting in the still sections of the pool like diamonds scattered across black velvet. Marcus found himself gazing upward at these distant suns while feeling held and supported by the warm embrace of the earth itself. Suspended between heaven and earth in a moment of perfect balance and infinite peace. Chapter 3: The Marble Embrace. As Marcus settled more deeply into the thermal pool, the warm water working its patient magic on muscles that had forgotten how to truly relax, he became aware of the extraordinary marble that surrounded him. This was not ordinary stone, but something far more precious, marble that had been chosen not just for its beauty, but for its unique properties of heat retention and therapeutic resonance. The ancient Romans had understood that true healing required attention to every detail, and they had spared no expense in creating an environment where every surface, every texture, every visual element contributed to the overall experience of restoration. The marble beneath his hands was polished to a finish so smooth it felt almost like warm silk. Yet beneath this polished surface, Marcus could sense the stone's deeper nature, its crystalline structure that had been formed over millions of years, deep within the earth, under conditions of tremendous pressure and heat. This marble held within its matrix the memory of geological ages, the slow, patient process of transformation that had created something of enduring beauty from the raw materials of the earth. As he explored the pool's interior with gentle touches, Marcus discovered that the marble had been carved and shaped with extraordinary attention to ergonomic comfort. Underwater seats had been sculpted to perfectly support the human form, allowing visitors to recline in the heated water without strain or discomfort. These seats followed the natural curves of the body so precisely that sitting in them felt like being embraced by the earth itself. Held in a position of perfect ease and rest, the walls of the pool were decorated with intricate carvings that seemed to come alive in the shifting light created by the dancing flames of the oil lamps. These reliefs depicted scenes of natural beauty, flowing water, growing vines, soaring birds, and peaceful pastoral landscapes that drew the eye into contemplation of nature's endless capacity for renewal and regeneration. The carved grapevines seemed almost to move in the flickering light, their leaves and tendrils creating shadows that danced across the water's surface like living things. Marcus found himself particularly drawn to a carving of a natural spring emerging from a hillside, surrounded by trees and flowers. The unknown artist had captured not just the visual appearance of flowing water, but somehow its essential spirit, the sense of life and renewal that springs represented to the ancient world. Water nymphs danced in the carved flow, their expressions filled with joy and liberation, their hair streaming behind them like liquid silk, as they celebrated the eternal gift of pure, healing water. The thermal currents within the pool created their own patterns and rhythms, and Marcus began to notice how these invisible rivers of heated water interacted with the marble surfaces around them, where the currents met carved indentations in the pool's walls. They created gentle whirlpools and eddies that provided natural massage for anyone positioned to receive them. The ancient engineers had clearly understood the principles of hydrodynamics and had used this knowledge to enhance the therapeutic effects of the natural springs. The color of the marble itself was not uniform, but varied in subtle ways that added depth and interest to the visual experience. Veins of slightly different shades ran through the stone like frozen rivers, creating patterns that were both random and harmonious, chaotic and ordered. These natural variations caught and reflected the lamplight in different ways, so that the entire pool seemed to glow with an inner radiance that shifted and changed as Marcus moved through the water. Above the pool, elegant arches framed the star-filled sky, and Marcus realized that these architectural elements were not merely decorative, but served important functions in creating the perfect environment for healing. The arches were positioned to allow the thermal air to circulate naturally, while protecting the bathing area from any possibility of wind or weather. They also served to frame specific views of distant hills, of other pools within the complex, of gardens and walkways, creating a sense of connection with the larger landscape, while maintaining the intimate, sheltered feeling of the immediate space. As Marcus moved slowly through the water, exploring different areas of the pool, he discovered that each section had its own unique characteristics. Near the main spring source, the water was slightly hotter and more heavily mineralized, perfect for addressing deep muscular tension and chronic aches. In quieter corners, the temperature was more moderate, ideal for extended soaking and meditation. Shallow areas allowed for comfortable reclining, while deeper sections provided opportunity for more complete immersion. The marble steps that he had descended to enter the pool extended all around its perimeter, creating not just access points, but comfortable seating areas where visitors could partially submerge themselves while still maintaining easy conversation with others, or simply sitting in quiet contemplation. These steps were worn to a beautiful patina by countless feet, and their smooth surfaces felt wonderfully warm and comfortable against the skin. Marcus began to notice other details that spoke to the incredible thoughtfulness with which this sanctuary had been designed. Small channels carved into the marble provided perfect resting places for cups of the healing mineral water that bubbled up from dedicated drinking springs. Niches in the walls held personal belongings safely above the water level, while keeping them easily accessible. Even the angles at which the various surfaces met had been carefully considered to avoid any sharp edges or uncomfortable contact points. The acoustic properties of the marble-lined pool were remarkable. The stone seemed to absorb harsh sounds while amplifying and enhancing the gentle, healing sounds of flowing water. Conversations between visitors took on a hushed, reverent quality that never disturbed the overall atmosphere of peace and tranquility. The constant whisper of the thermal springs was enhanced and enriched by the marble surfaces, creating a complex symphony of water sounds that varied subtly as one moved through different areas of the pool. As the evening deepened and more stars appeared in the sky above, Marcus found himself drawn to recline against one of the curved marble backrests that had been positioned to provide optimal support for extended soaking. The stone was pleasantly warm against his skin, heated by the thermal waters that flowed through hidden channels beneath the entire pool structure. This radiant heat seemed to penetrate not just his muscles, but his very bones, addressing a deep-seated coldness that he hadn't even realized he had been carrying. The texture of the marble varied in subtle ways that provided additional sensory interest and therapeutic benefit. Some surfaces were polished to mirror smoothness, while others retained a slightly rougher finish that provided gentle stimulation for the skin. These textural variations had been carefully planned to enhance circulation and provide a natural form of massage as visitors moved through the water, or rested against the various surfaces. Marcus began to understand that the marble was not just a building material, but an integral part of the healing process itself. The stone's ability to absorb, retain, and radiate heat created a stable thermal environment that supported the body's natural healing processes. Its mineral content, slowly released into the water over centuries of use, added additional therapeutic elements to the already rich mineral composition of the natural springs. The visual beauty of the marble also played a crucial role in the healing process. Its subtle colors and flowing patterns provided a feast for the eyes that was both stimulating and deeply relaxing. Unlike harsh or jarring visual elements that might agitate the nervous system, the marble's natural patterns seemed to quiet the mind and encourage a state of peaceful contemplation that was essential for true restoration and renewal. As Marcus continued to soak in the healing waters, surrounded by the marble embrace that had sheltered seekers of peace for centuries, he felt his connection to this ancient place deepening with each passing moment. The stone seemed to hold within its crystalline structure not just physical warmth, but the accumulated peace and healing of all those who had found restoration in these sacred waters. He was not just bathing in thermal springs, but participating in an unbroken tradition of healing that stretched back through countless generations of human seeking and renewal. The marble columns that supported the graceful arches seemed to pulse gently with their own inner rhythm. And Marcus realized that he was beginning to perceive subtleties of this place that went far beyond the merely physical. The thermal springs and their marble setting were creating an environment that touched not just the body, but the deepest levels of being, offering a form of healing that was as ancient as human civilization and as enduring as the stone itself. Chapter 4: The Symphony of Waters. The longer Marcus remained in the thermal pool, the more attuned he became to the extraordinary complexity of sounds that surrounded him. What had initially seemed like a simple murmur of flowing water revealed itself to be an intricate symphony composed of dozens of different water voices, each contributing its own unique tone and rhythm to an overall composition that seemed designed by nature itself to promote deep relaxation and inner peace. The primary spring that fed his pool bubbled up from depths unknown, its voice a steady, rhythmic pulsing that reminded Marcus of a great heart beating slowly and peacefully. This sound formed the bass note of the water symphony, a deep, reassuring pulse that seemed to resonate not just in his ears, but throughout his entire body. As he focused on this fundamental rhythm, Marcus found his own heartbeat beginning to slow and synchronize with the Earth's ancient tempo. Smaller springs contributed higher notes to the composition, their voices ranging from gentle whispers to soft, melodic gurgles. Some emerged as tiny bubbles that rose through the clear water with sounds like distant chimes or falling drops of liquid crystal. Others flowed as miniature waterfalls over carved marble lips, creating delicate cascade sounds that wove through the deeper rhythms like silver threads through rich fabric. The thermal currents themselves added another layer to the symphony as heated water rose from the depths and mixed with the slightly cooler surface layers. It created subtle swirling sounds, gentle whooshes and sighs that spoke of the constant, slow dance of temperature and density that kept the pool's healing waters in perfect, eternal motion. These currents were invisible to the eye, but audible to anyone who took the time to listen deeply. Marcus began to notice that the marble surfaces around the pool modified and enhanced these water sounds in sophisticated ways. The curved walls acted as resonating chambers, amplifying certain frequencies while dampening others, creating a natural acoustic balance that was both rich and soothing. The stones seemed to have been shaped not just for visual beauty and physical comfort, but to create optimal sound conditions for healing and meditation. From nearby pools came additional water voices that added depth and complexity to the overall auditory experience. A larger pool to his left contributed the sound of more substantial water movement, the gentle lapping of thermal waves against marble sides, the soft splash of other visitors entering and moving through the healing waters, the quiet overflow of water cascading from one level to another through carefully designed channels. To his right, a smaller, more intimate pool added its own delicate notes to the symphony. This pool seemed to be fed by several tiny springs simultaneously, creating a complex polyrhythm of different bubble patterns and flow rates. The sound was like gentle rain on a calm lake, or perhaps like the quiet conversation of water spirits discussing the ancient secrets of healing and renewal. As Marcus moved slowly through his own pool, he discovered that his position affected what he could hear, and how clearly different elements of the water symphony reached his ears. Near the main spring source, the deeper, more powerful sounds dominated, creating an experience that was grounding and centering. In quieter corners, the subtle details became more apparent. The tiny sounds of individual bubbles, the whisper of water moving through narrow channels in the marble, the almost inaudible hiss of thermal vapors rising into the warm air. The acoustic properties of the entire spring complex had clearly been considered as carefully as any other aspect of its design. Pathways between pools were positioned to allow the sounds of different water features to blend harmoniously rather than compete or clash. Walls and barriers were shaped to guide sound waves in ways that enhanced rather than disturbed the overall atmosphere of tranquility. Marcus found that by closing his eyes and simply listening, he could map the entire spring complex through sound alone. Each pool had its own acoustic signature, its own unique combination of spring sounds, water movement, and marble resonance. The drinking springs contributed their own delicate voices, the soft tinkle of mineral water dropping into collection basins, the gentle overflow that kept these sources fresh and pure. Even the sounds made by other visitors seemed to blend naturally into the water symphony. Footsteps on wet marble became part of the percussion section, their rhythm echoing the deeper pulses of the springs themselves. Quiet conversations took on the quality of wind moving through reeds, adding human warmth to the natural composition without disturbing its essential character. As the night deepened, Marcus began to notice that the water symphony was not constant, but evolved slowly over time. The springs seemed to have their own circadian rhythms, with slight variations in flow rate and temperature that created corresponding changes in the acoustic landscape. During the deeper hours of evening, the sounds became even more gentle and soothing, as if the earth itself was settling into a restful state that encouraged all visitors to do the same. The mineral content of the water added its own subtle acoustic elements. The dissolved salts and other healing compounds seemed to affect the way sound traveled through the liquid medium, creating a unique resonance that was both clear and soft. This mineral-enhanced water carried sound waves in ways that felt particularly pleasing to the human ear, contributing to the overall sense of acoustic comfort and well-being. Marcus discovered that he could use the water sounds as a form of natural meditation, allowing his attention to rest on different aspects of the symphony as a way of quieting his mind and deepening his relaxation. Focusing on the steady pulse of the main spring helped to center his thoughts and calm his nervous system. Attending to the delicate details of smaller springs engaged his concentration in ways that naturally excluded worry and mental chatter. The interplay between all these different water voices created patterns and rhythms that seemed to shift and change like slow, liquid music. Sometimes the sounds would align in ways that created moments of particular harmony and resonance. Other times, the various rhythms would create complex polyrhythmic patterns that were both intellectually interesting and deeply relaxing. As Marcus continued to soak in the thermal waters, he began to understand that this symphony of waters was not just pleasant background noise, but an integral part of the healing process itself. The sounds worked directly on the nervous system, encouraging the deep relaxation necessary for restoration and renewal. They provided a natural focus for meditation, helping to quiet the mind and turn attention away from the concerns and anxieties of daily life toward the present moment of healing and peace. The Water Symphony also created a sense of timelessness that was essential to the overall experience of the thermal springs. Without the usual markers of passing time, the sounds of traffic, the chiming of clocks, the bustle of human activity, Marcus found himself entering a state where minutes and hours became irrelevant. There was only the eternal now of flowing water, heated stone, and the gradual, patient work of healing that was taking place in every cell of his being. The ancient Romans who had created this sanctuary had understood something profound about the relationship between sound and healing. They had designed the thermal springs not just as baths, but as instruments of restoration, using the natural music of water and stone to create an environment where true peace could flourish and deep healing could occur. In this symphony of waters, Marcus was beginning to find not just physical comfort, but a profound sense of harmony with the natural world and with the deepest, most peaceful aspects of his own being. Chapter 5: The Mineral Embrace. As Marcus continued his immersion in the thermal springs, he became increasingly aware of the extraordinary properties of the water itself. This was not ordinary water, but a liquid medium enriched with minerals drawn from deep within the earth. Each dissolved element contributing its own unique healing properties to create a natural elixir of restoration and renewal. The water seemed to embrace his skin with a silky smoothness that spoke of its rich mineral content, creating sensations that were both pleasurable and profoundly therapeutic. The sulfur content of the springs gave the water its distinctive mineral fragrance, a clean, earthy scent that reminded Marcus of rain on hot stone and deep caves where crystals grew in absolute darkness. This sulfur, he had heard, was particularly beneficial for the skin, helping to soften and heal while promoting the circulation that brought fresh nutrients to every cell. As he breathed the mineral-scented air that rose from the pool's surface, Marcus felt this healing element entering not just through his skin, but through his lungs as well, creating a comprehensive therapeutic experience that touched every part of his being. The calcium and magnesium dissolved in the water worked to relax his muscles at the deepest level, addressing tensions that had become so chronic he had forgotten they weren't natural. These alkaline earth metals interacted with his body's own chemistry in ways that promoted profound muscular release, allowing knots and restrictions that had persisted for months to finally begin unwinding. Marcus could feel this process happening in real time as he soaked, a gradual softening and lengthening of muscle fibers that had been contracted for far too long. The iron content of the springs added a subtle metallic note to the water's taste when Marcus cupped his hands and sipped from the pool. This element, essential for healthy blood and circulation, seemed to energize him even as it relaxed him, creating a paradoxical state of alert restfulness that he had never experienced before. The iron worked synergistically with the other minerals to enhance the oxygen-carrying capacity of his blood, bringing fresh vitality to organs and tissues that had been starved of proper nourishment by the stress and tension of recent months. Potassium and sodium, present in perfect natural balance, helped to regulate the electrical activity of his nervous system, calming the hyperactive nerve pathways that had kept him in a constant state of low-level anxiety and alertness. As these electrolytes penetrated his skin and entered his bloodstream, Marcus felt his entire nervous system beginning to reset itself, finding a new equilibrium that was both more peaceful and more sustainable than the chronic stress state he had grown accustomed to living with. The trace amounts of lithium naturally present in the thermal waters contributed to an overall sense of emotional well-being and mental clarity that surprised Marcus with its gentleness and depth. This natural mood stabilizer worked so subtly that he was barely conscious of its effects. But gradually, he became aware that the persistent undercurrent of worry and mental agitation that had colored his thoughts for so long was beginning to fade into the background, replaced by a clarity and calm that felt like his true natural state returning after a long absence. Silicon dioxide, dissolved from the ancient rock formations through which the thermal waters flowed, helped to strengthen his skin and connective tissues while promoting the kind of deep cellular repair that could only happen in states of profound relaxation. Marcus could feel this process as a gentle, tingling sensation throughout his body, as if every cell was being renewed and revitalized at the molecular level. The radioactive elements present in tiny, therapeutic amounts added their own subtle healing properties to the mineral mixture. These natural radioactive compounds, far from being harmful, stimulated cellular activity and immune function in ways that promoted overall health and vitality. Marcus felt this as a gentle warming sensation that seemed to emanate from within his own body. as if the mineral waters were awakening dormant healing capacities that he hadn't known he possessed. As he moved through different areas of the pool, Marcus discovered that the mineral concentrations varied slightly depending on proximity to different spring sources and the varying depths from which they emerged. Near the primary thermal vent, the water was more intensely mineralized, creating an almost electric sensation against his skin as the concentrated healing elements worked their magic. In areas where multiple springs converged, the mineral profiles blended to create unique therapeutic combinations that addressed different aspects of physical and mental restoration. The thermal waters had been naturally filtered through layers of rock and sediment over thousands of years, emerging pure and sterile, while retaining their full complement of healing minerals. This natural purification process had removed any harmful substances while concentrating the beneficial elements to optimal therapeutic levels. Marcus marveled at the perfection of this natural pharmacy, created by geological processes that had been working for millennia to prepare this exact healing medium for anyone wise enough to seek it out. The pH balance of the water was perfectly adjusted by natural processes to be neither too acidic nor too alkaline, but precisely calibrated to support optimal absorption of the healing minerals through the skin. This natural buffering system ensured that the therapeutic effects were both gentle and powerful, working with the body's own chemistry rather than overwhelming or disrupting it. Marcus began to understand that his skin was not just in contact with the mineral water, but was actively participating in a complex exchange of elements. His body was releasing toxins and metabolic waste products into the water, while simultaneously absorbing the healing minerals that would support restoration and renewal. This was not a passive soaking, but an active process of purification and nourishment that was taking place at the cellular level throughout his entire being. The warmth of the water helped to open his pores and increase circulation, enhancing the absorption of the beneficial minerals while facilitating the elimination of accumulated toxins. Marcus could feel this detoxification process as a gentle cleansing sensation, as if layers of accumulated stress and environmental pollutants were being drawn out of his system and replaced with pure, healing energy from the earth itself. The mineral waters also seemed to have a profound effect on his mental and emotional state. The combination of elements worked to balance neurotransmitter activity in ways that promoted feelings of peace, contentment, and overall well-being. Marcus found that worries that had seemed overwhelming just hours before now appeared manageable or even irrelevant. not because he was avoiding them, but because the mineral-induced clarity allowed him to see them in proper perspective as the evening progressed, and the mineral waters continued their patient work of healing and restoration. Marcus felt himself entering an increasingly profound state of relaxation and renewal. Every system in his body seemed to be responding to the therapeutic environment, finding new levels of balance and harmony that he had almost forgot were possible. The ancient Romans had chosen this site not just for its beauty or convenience, but because they understood that these particular mineral waters possessed unique healing properties that could address the deepest needs of both body and spirit. The thermal springs were revealing themselves to be not just a place of physical comfort, but a natural healing center where the earth itself provided precisely the elements needed for complete restoration and renewal. In the embrace of these mineral-rich waters, Marcus was discovering a form of medicine that was both ancient and timeless, as relevant today as it had been to the emperors and citizens of Rome, who had sought healing in these same sacred pools centuries before his arrival. Chapter 6: Companions in Tranquility. As Marcus settled even deeper into the mineral embrace of the thermal springs, he became aware of the other seekers who shared this sacred space with him. These companions in tranquility moved through the various pools and pathways with a grace and mindfulness that spoke of their own journeys toward healing and restoration. Their presence added a dimension of gentle human warmth to the natural sanctuary, without in any way disturbing the profound peace that permeated every aspect of the thermal springs complex. An elderly woman named Livia had been coming to these springs for many years, and her presence carried the serene authority of someone who had found in this place not just temporary relief, but lasting transformation. She moved through the water with the fluid grace of someone who had learned to trust completely in the healing process. Her weathered hands trailing through the mineral-rich liquid, as if she were blessing it with her touch. When she settled into her preferred spot near the drinking spring, her face took on an expression of such profound contentment that Marcus felt his own relaxation deepening simply by observing her peaceful state. Livia had the gift of creating peace around her wherever she went. Other visitors seemed naturally drawn to her quiet presence, finding in her vicinity an enhanced sense of safety and tranquility. She spoke little, but when she did share words, they were invariably wise and comforting, spoken in the soft, measured tones of someone who had learned the value of speaking only when words could add to rather than disturb the healing atmosphere. A younger man named Felix had arrived at the springs, carrying the weight of intense mental exhaustion. Marcus recognized in him something of his own condition: the tight shoulders, the darting eyes, the restless movements of someone whose nervous system had been overtaxed for far too long. But as the evening progressed, Marcus watched Felix undergo a remarkable transformation. The mineral waters and peaceful environment were working their magic, and the young man's rigid posture gradually softened. His breathing deepened, and his movements became increasingly fluid and relaxed. Felix's journey toward peace was particularly visible because he was experiencing it in real time. Marcus found himself inspired by watching someone else discover what he too was beginning to experience: the profound relief of finally allowing the body and mind to release their grip on chronic tension and anxiety. Felix's gradual transformation served as a mirror for Marcus's own healing process, confirming that the changes he was feeling within himself were real and meaningful. A middle-aged couple, Helena and Gaius, moved through the springs together with the synchronized grace of people who had shared many healing journeys. They seemed to communicate without words, each intuitively knowing when the other needed space for solitary reflection, and when they desired shared communion in the healing waters. Their relationship itself appeared to have been healed and strengthened by their regular visits to the thermal springs, and their obvious love and consideration for each other added another layer of warmth and harmony to the overall atmosphere. Helena and Gaius had developed their own gentle rituals around their visits to the springs. They would begin by sitting together on the warm marble benches, sharing quiet conversation about their week and their intentions for the healing session to come. Then they would enter the waters separately, each seeking their own optimal temperature and mineral concentration, but always remaining aware of and connected to each other's presence. Later, they would reunite in one of the larger pools, floating together in peaceful silence as the stars emerged in the darkening sky above. A young woman named Claudia moved through the springs with the careful attention of someone recovering from physical injury. Her movements were slow and deliberate, but not from exhaustion or depression. Rather, from a mindful awareness of her body's healing process and a deep respect for the therapeutic power of the mineral waters. Marcus watched her settle into a pool with water that was slightly cooler than most, understanding instinctively that different conditions were optimal for different types of healing. Claudia's presence reminded Marcus that healing took many forms and followed many different timelines. While he was seeking relief from mental and emotional exhaustion, she was addressing physical trauma, and yet the springs offered their gifts equally to both. The thermal waters seemed to possess an innate wisdom, about what each person needed, providing not a one-size-fits-all solution, but a personalized healing experience that adapted to individual requirements and conditions. An artist named Antonius brought a different energy to the springs, one of creative seeking and aesthetic appreciation. He moved through the complex with eyes that saw not just the functional aspects of the healing environment, but its profound beauty as well. Marcus watched him studying the play of lamplight on the water's surface, the graceful curves of the marble architecture, the way steam rose and dispersed in patterns that seemed to follow some mysterious natural geometry. Antonius had brought with him a small wax tablet, and occasionally he would make quick sketches of details that particularly captured his imagination. But these artistic activities never seemed to disturb his relaxation or that of others around him. Instead, his creative engagement with the environment seemed to deepen his appreciation for the spring's healing gifts. And his obvious delight in the beauty around him added to the overall sense of wonder and gratitude that permeated the sacred space. An elderly philosopher named Aurelius spent much of his time in quiet contemplation, his eyes closed and his breathing deep and regular as he practiced forms of meditation that seemed perfectly suited to the peaceful environment of the thermal springs. His presence added an element of spiritual depth to the gathering, reminding others that the springs offered not just physical healing, but opportunities for profound inner reflection and spiritual renewal. Aurelius seemed to embody the wisdom that came from years of regular visits to the springs, combined with a lifetime of philosophical study and practice. His peace was so complete and stable that it seemed to radiate outward, touching everyone in his vicinity with its calming influence. Marcus found that positioning himself near Aurelius enhanced his own meditative experience, as if the older man's decades of practice had created a field of tranquility that others could share and benefit from. These companions in healing did not intrude upon each other's experiences, but rather enhanced them through their collective presence. There was an unspoken understanding among all the visitors that they were participating together in something sacred and profound. And this shared recognition created a sense of community that was supportive without being demanding, connected without being invasive. The interactions between visitors were minimal but meaningful. A gentle nod of acknowledgement when entering a shared pool, a quiet word of gratitude when someone made space for another, the simple sharing of peaceful smiles. These small gestures wove together to create an atmosphere of mutual respect and support that enhanced the healing potential of the thermal springs for everyone present. Marcus began to understand that solitude and community were not opposites in this place, but complementary aspects of the healing process. The presence of others who were engaged in their own journeys toward restoration created a field of healing intention that was larger and more powerful than any individual effort could be. At the same time, the respect for personal space and inner process ensured that each person could pursue their healing in whatever way felt most natural and beneficial to them. As the night deepened and the various companions settled more fully into their individual healing experiences, Marcus felt a profound sense of gratitude for these fellow travelers on the path toward peace and restoration. Their presence had shown him that he was not alone in his need for healing, that many others had found in these ancient springs the same gifts of renewal and transformation that he was beginning to experience. Together, they formed a temporary community of healing that honored both the individual journey and the collective power of shared intention and mutual support. In the company of these peaceful souls, Marcus felt his own healing deepening and expanding in ways that might not have been possible in complete solitude. The thermal springs had revealed themselves to be not just a natural pharmacy, but a place where human beings could come together in their vulnerability and their hope, supporting each other's healing simply through their shared presence in this sacred space of restoration and renewal. Chapter 7: The Garden of Healing Vapors. As the evening deepened into night, Marcus felt drawn to explore beyond the immediate thermal pool that had been his sanctuary for the past several hours. The mineral waters had worked their magic on his physical being, but he sensed that the spring's complex held additional gifts for those who were ready to receive them. Rising slowly from the heated pool, his body feeling simultaneously energized and deeply relaxed, he wrapped himself in the soft linen robe and began to follow marble pathways that led through carefully tended gardens where aromatic vapors rose from hidden thermal vents. The transition from water to air was remarkably gentle, as the thermal heating system that warmed the marble pathways ensured that there was no shock of temperature change. The warm stone beneath his feet seemed to maintain the healing connection he had established with the Earth's thermal energy, allowing him to carry the benefits of his soaking experience with him. As he explored this new dimension of the healing sanctuary, the gardens themselves were marvels of both natural beauty and therapeutic design. Ancient Roman horticulturists had understood the healing properties of plants and had created carefully planned landscapes where every growing thing contributed to the overall experience of restoration and renewal. Lavender grew in abundance along the pathways, its purple spikes releasing their calming fragrance into the warm night air with each gentle breeze. Marcus found himself breathing more deeply as he walked among these aromatic plants, feeling their essential oils working to further relax his nervous system and quiet his mind. Rosemary bushes, shaped by years of careful pruning into graceful forms, added their invigorating scent to the garden's olfactory symphony. This herb, sacred to memory and mental clarity, seemed to sharpen Marcus's awareness even as it relaxed him, creating an ideal state of alert tranquility that was perfect for the deep healing work that was taking place within his body and psyche. The rosemary's needle-like leaves glistened with condensed thermal vapors, concentrating their essential oils and releasing them in more potent form with each footstep. Along the garden paths, chamomile grew in delicate patches between the larger shrubs, its small white flowers glowing like tiny stars in the soft illumination of the garden lamps. The sweet, apple-like fragrance of these flowers added a note of gentle comfort to the healing atmosphere, working to soothe any remaining traces of anxiety or emotional upset. Marcus paused beside one particularly lush patch of chamomile, kneeling to breathe deeply of its calming essence and feeling another layer of tension dissolve from around his heart. The thermal vapors that rose from concealed vents throughout the garden carried with them not just heat, but the dissolved essences of minerals and therapeutic compounds that had been heated far below the surface of the earth. These natural aromatherapy treatments were even more subtle and gentle than the direct contact with mineral waters. But Marcus found them to be profoundly effective in addressing the more delicate aspects of emotional and spiritual healing. Steam that emerged near plantings of sage carried with it the herb's purifying properties, creating an atmosphere that seemed to cleanse not just the air, but the very thoughts and feelings of anyone who breathed it. Marcus felt old resentments and disappointments beginning to release their hold on his consciousness as he walked through these purifying vapors, replaced by a growing sense of clarity and emotional freedom. Thermal vents, positioned among groves of eucalyptus trees, created healing steam that was particularly beneficial for respiratory health and mental alertness. The camphor-like fragrance of the eucalyptus, enhanced by the warm mineral vapors, seemed to open breathing passages that Marcus hadn't realized were constricted, allowing him to breathe more fully and deeply than he had in months. This enhanced oxygenation of his blood brought with it increased mental clarity and a sense of vitality that complemented perfectly the deep relaxation he had gained from his time in the thermal pools. Small grottos carved into the hillsides housed specialized vapor chambers where visitors could experience concentrated aromatherapy treatments. Marcus discovered one such chamber that was naturally ventilated by thermal air that had passed through underground beds of medicinal clay. The vapors here carried trace amounts of healing minerals in gaseous form, providing a form of therapy that reached deep into the respiratory system, and from there into the bloodstream, carrying therapeutic benefits to every organ and tissue in the body. Another grotto featured vapors that had been naturally infused with sulfur compounds, creating a more intensive version of the mineral therapy he had experienced in the pools. The concentration of these healing gases was carefully regulated by natural air circulation patterns, ensuring that the treatment was powerful without being overwhelming. Marcus spent time in this healing atmosphere, feeling the sulfur compounds working to detoxify his system at the cellular level, while promoting the kind of deep cellular regeneration that could only occur in states of profound relaxation. The garden pathways themselves seemed designed to create a moving meditation experience. The roots wound gently through the landscape, neither straight lines that would encourage hurried passage, nor labyrinthine complexity that might create confusion or frustration. Instead, the paths followed natural contours and sight lines that drew the walker forward at a pace that was contemplative and unhurried, perfect for absorbing the various therapeutic benefits offered by different areas of the garden. Benches carved from the same warm marble used throughout the complex were positioned at intervals along the paths, each placed to take advantage of particular combinations of thermal vapors and aromatic plants. Marcus found himself drawn to rest on several of these benches, using each pause as an opportunity to focus on different aspects of the healing environment and to allow the various therapeutic elements time to work their subtle magic on his body and consciousness. One bench was positioned to receive vapors that had been naturally filtered through beds of pine needles, creating an atmosphere that was both invigorating and deeply grounding. The resinous fragrance seemed to connect Marcus with the ancient wisdom of trees and forests, reminding him of his fundamental connection to the natural world, and helping him to release the artificial stresses and concerns that had accumulated during his time in the busy human world of the city. Another resting place was surrounded by plantings of mint and other cooling herbs, and the thermal vapors here carried their refreshing essences in concentrations that were perfectly balanced for promoting mental clarity and emotional equilibrium. Marcus found that sitting in this area helped to integrate the various healing experiences he had been receiving, allowing the different therapeutic elements to work together synergistically rather than in isolation. As he continued his exploration of the garden, Marcus began to understand that this entire landscape was actually a sophisticated therapy system designed to address healing at multiple levels simultaneously. The combination of mineral vapors, plant essences, carefully controlled temperatures, and beautiful visual environments created conditions that were optimal for the kind of deep, comprehensive healing that addressed not just symptoms, but root causes of imbalance and disease. The ancient designers of this sanctuary had understood something that modern medicine was only beginning to rediscover: that true healing required attention to the whole person, not just isolated symptoms or conditions. By creating an environment that addressed physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual needs simultaneously, they had constructed what was perhaps the world's first holistic healing center, a place where the Earth's own therapeutic resources could be experienced in their full complexity and power. As Marcus made his way slowly through the garden of healing vapors, breathing deeply of the therapeutic atmosphere and feeling layer after layer of accumulated stress and tension continuing to release from his being, he realized that his healing journey was entering a new phase. The thermal pools had begun the process of physical restoration, but the garden was offering something even more profound: a reconnection with the healing power of the natural world itself, a remembering of what it felt like to live in harmony with the Earth's own rhythms and cycles of renewal. Chapter 8: The Chamber of Deep Rest. Following a pathway illuminated by oil lamps whose flames danced gently in the mineral-scented air, Marcus discovered an area of the thermal springs complex that seemed designed specifically for the deepest levels of relaxation and restoration. This was a series of intimate chambers carved directly into the hillside, where the Earth's natural thermal energy had been channeled to create environments of such profound tranquility that entering them felt like stepping into the very heart of peace itself. The first chamber Marcus encountered was accessed through an archway so elegantly proportioned that passing through it felt like a ritual transition from one state of being to another. The space beyond was dimly lit by a few carefully placed oil lamps, their soft illumination revealing walls of natural stone that had been polished smooth by centuries of thermal vapors. The chamber was warm, but not hot, heated by thermal currents that flowed through channels carved deep within the stone walls, creating an environment that embraced the body with perfect comfort while encouraging the deepest possible relaxation. The floor of the chamber was covered with thick cushions made from the finest wool, dyed in soft earth tones that seemed to glow with their own inner warmth in the lamplight. These cushions had been arranged to provide optimal support for reclining in various positions, allowing visitors to find whatever posture felt most natural and comfortable for their individual needs. Marcus selected a cushion that seemed to call to him and settled onto it slowly, feeling the soft wool embrace his body, while the warm stone walls radiated their gentle heat around him. The acoustic properties of the chamber were remarkable. The stone walls seemed to absorb and muffle any harsh sounds, while enhancing the subtle, peaceful sounds that promoted relaxation. The thermal currents moving through the walls created an almost inaudible humming sound, so low and gentle that it was felt more than heard, like the earth itself breathing slowly and peacefully. This natural sound seemed to resonate with the deepest rhythms of the human body, encouraging a state of profound physiological calm. As Marcus settled more deeply into the chamber's embrace, he became aware of the extraordinary purity of the air around him. The thermal currents that heated the space also provided gentle ventilation, constantly refreshing the atmosphere while maintaining perfect temperature and humidity levels. The air itself seemed to carry healing properties, infused with trace minerals and negative ions that promoted feelings of well-being and mental clarity. The chamber's design seemed to understand the needs of the human nervous system in ways that went far beyond mere comfort. The gentle curves of the walls, the soft textures of the cushions, the warm but not overwhelming temperature, the subtle but present thermal sounds. Every element worked together to signal to the body and mind that it was safe to release completely, to let go of the vigilance and tension that had become habitual responses to the stresses of daily life. Marcus found himself entering states of relaxation that he had never experienced before. His breathing became so slow and deep that he sometimes wondered if he had forgotten to breathe at all, only to realize that his body had found its own perfect rhythm, one that required no conscious control or effort. His heartbeat slowed to match the ancient rhythms of the earth itself, and he felt his individual identity beginning to merge with something larger and more peaceful than his ordinary sense of self. Time seemed to operate differently in the chamber of deep rest. What might have been minutes or hours passed in a state of such perfect present moment awareness that duration became irrelevant. Marcus felt himself existing in an eternal now, where past concerns and future anxieties simply had no place or power. There was only the perfect comfort of the present moment, supported by the earth's own healing energy and surrounded by an atmosphere of absolute safety and peace. Other visitors occasionally entered and left the chamber, but their presence only enhanced rather than disturbed the overall atmosphere of tranquility. Each person seemed to understand intuitively that this was a space for the deepest kind of inner work, and they moved with a reverence and quietude that honored the sacred nature of the healing process taking place within these stone walls. Marcus began to experience what he could only describe as a profound homecoming, a return to a state of being that felt more natural and authentic than any he had known in recent memory. The constant background tension that had colored every moment of his life for months was dissolving so completely that he could barely remember what it had felt like to carry such a burden. In its place was emerging a state of deep contentment and inner peace that seemed to arise from the very core of his being. The mineral-infused air that he breathed in the chamber seemed to carry healing properties directly into his bloodstream, and from there to every cell in his body. He could feel processes of restoration and renewal taking place at levels so fundamental that they were normally completely unconscious. It was as if his body was remembering how to heal itself, how to maintain the delicate balance of systems and processes that supported optimal health and well-being. The thermal energy that surrounded him in the chamber worked not just on his muscles and joints, but on the subtle energy systems that traditional healers had recognized for thousands of years. Marcus felt blockages and restrictions in these energy pathways beginning to dissolve, allowing the natural flow of life force to resume its proper circulation throughout his being. This restoration of energetic balance brought with it a sense of vitality and wholeness that was the very opposite of the fragmentation and depletion he had been experiencing. As he rested in the chamber's perfect embrace, Marcus began to understand that true healing was not just about the absence of symptoms or the relief of pain, but about the restoration of a fundamental harmony between all aspects of his being. The thermal springs were facilitating not just physical recovery, but a profound reintegration of body, mind, and spirit that would create a foundation for sustained health and well-being long after he left this sacred place. The chamber seemed to hold within its stone walls the accumulated peace and healing of all those who had rested here before him. Emperors and commoners, warriors and philosophers, artists and healers, all had found in this space the same profound rest that Marcus was now experiencing. Their peace had somehow become embedded in the very structure of the chamber, creating a field of healing intention that supported and amplified the natural therapeutic properties of the thermal environment. Marcus felt himself being held not just by the physical comfort of the cushions and the warm stone walls, but by an invisible web of compassion and healing intention that had been woven by countless souls who had made this same journey toward restoration and renewal. He was not alone in his healing, but was supported by a lineage of seekers who had discovered in this place the secret of true rest and the pathway to profound transformation. In the deepest moments of his rest in the chamber, Marcus began to glimpse what lay at the very heart of the healing process. A return to a state of being that was characterized not by the absence of challenge or difficulty, but by the presence of an unshakable inner peace that could weather any storm. This peace was not dependent on external circumstances, but arose from a deep connection to the fundamental tranquility that lay at the core of existence itself. The chamber of deep rest was revealing itself to be not just a place of temporary relief, but a doorway to a way of being that could be carried back into daily life. The profound relaxation and restoration that Marcus was experiencing here was showing him what was possible when the body and mind were allowed to return to their natural state of balance and harmony. This was not an escape from life, but a preparation for living with greater wisdom, compassion, and inner strength. Chapter 9: The Sacred Grove of Renewal. As dawn began to touch the eastern horizon with the faintest suggestion of light, Marcus felt himself naturally emerging from the deep rest he had found in the thermal chamber. His body moved with a fluidity and grace that felt entirely new, as if the night's healing had not just relaxed his muscles, but had fundamentally reorganized his entire physical being. Following an inner prompting that seemed to arise from the earth itself, he made his way through the pre-dawn quiet toward a part of the springs complex that he had not yet explored, a sacred grove where ancient trees stood sentinel over pools of thermal water that reflected the slowly brightening sky. The grove occupied a natural amphitheater carved into the hillside, where thermal springs emerged at multiple levels to create a series of terraced pools connected by gentle waterfalls and flowing channels. But what made this area truly extraordinary were the trees, ancient oaks and olive trees that had grown here for centuries, their roots intertwining with the thermal springs themselves, creating a living partnership between plant and mineral that enhanced the healing properties of both. The massive oak that dominated the center of the grove had a trunk so large that it would have taken a dozen people holding hands to encircle it. Its bark was deeply furrowed with age, and its enormous branches created a natural cathedral space beneath its canopy. The tree's roots extended deep into the earth, where they drew not just water and nutrients, but thermal energy as well, transforming the great oak into a living conduit for the earth's healing power. Marcus approached this ancient guardian with a sense of reverence that felt entirely appropriate. The tree seemed to radiate the same peaceful energy that characterized the thermal springs themselves, but with an added quality of deep wisdom and patience that could only come from centuries of growth and witness. Standing beneath its canopy felt like being embraced by time itself, held in a space where the urgency and anxiety of human concerns simply had no place or power. The thermal pools in the grove were different from those Marcus had experienced elsewhere in the complex. Here, the mineral-rich water flowed directly over and around the root systems of the ancient trees, picking up additional therapeutic compounds from the living wood and bark. The result was water that seemed somehow more alive, more vital, charged with the life force of the trees, as well as the healing minerals of the earth. As Marcus waded into one of these tree-blessed pools, he felt immediately that the water here possessed qualities that went beyond the merely physical. The mineral content was enhanced by organic compounds from the trees, tannins, and essential oils that had been slowly released into the thermal streams over decades of patient interaction. These plant-derived medicines worked synergistically with the Earth's minerals to create a therapeutic environment that addressed not just the body, but the deepest levels of emotional and spiritual healing. The water temperature in the grove pools was perfectly calibrated for extended immersion, warm enough to penetrate deeply into muscles and joints, but not so hot as to create stress or discomfort. Marcus found that he could remain in these pools for hours without fatigue, his body naturally adjusting to the thermal environment as if it had been designed specifically for this form of aquatic meditation. The sound environment in the grove was unlike anything Marcus had experienced elsewhere in the Springs complex. The thermal waters flowing over and around the tree roots created complex acoustic patterns that seemed almost musical in their intricacy. The water sang as it moved through the grove, its voice constantly changing as it encountered different root formations and stone configurations, creating a natural symphony that was both soothing and energizing. The trees themselves added their own voices to this natural composition. The great oak's massive trunk and branches created subtle resonance chambers that amplified and modulated the sounds of flowing water, while the olive trees contributed their own delicate rustling as their leaves moved in the thermal currents that rose from the heated pools. The result was an acoustic environment that seemed designed by nature itself to promote the deepest states of meditation and inner peace. As the sun rose higher and began to filter through the canopy of leaves above, Marcus became aware of another dimension of the grove's healing power. The interplay of sunlight and thermal vapors created constantly shifting patterns of light and shadow that were both beautiful and therapeutically valuable. The dappled light seemed to pulse with its own rhythm, creating a visual meditation that complemented the acoustic symphony of the waters and the tactile therapy of the mineral-rich pools. The air in the grove was extraordinarily pure and vital, enhanced by the photosynthetic activity of the trees, as well as the negative ions generated by the flowing thermal waters. Marcus found that breathing this charged atmosphere was itself a form of therapy, filling his lungs with oxygen that seemed to carry healing energy directly into his bloodstream. And from there, to every cell in his body, other visitors to the grove moved with the same reverent awareness that Marcus felt. There was an unspoken understanding that this place was particularly sacred, that the combination of ancient trees and thermal springs created an environment where profound healing and spiritual renewal were not just possible, but inevitable for anyone who approached with an open heart and genuine need. An elderly woman sat in meditation beneath the great oak, her back against its massive trunk, her breathing synchronized with the slow, deep rhythms of the tree itself. She seemed to have achieved a state of perfect harmony with the grove's natural energies, and her peaceful presence enhanced the overall atmosphere of tranquility and renewal. A young man floated motionless in one of the thermal pools, his body completely relaxed and supported by the mineral-rich water, while his spirit seemed to commune with some deep source of wisdom and peace. His face wore an expression of such profound contentment that Marcus felt his own inner joy deepen, simply by witnessing this perfect example of what the grove's healing powers could accomplish. Marcus began to understand that the sacred grove represented the culmination of everything the thermal springs had to offer. Here, the Earth's mineral gifts were enhanced by the life force of ancient trees, creating an environment where healing could occur at levels that addressed not just the symptoms of imbalance, but the deepest roots of human suffering and disconnection. The thermal pools in the grove seemed to facilitate not just physical healing, but a profound remembering of what it meant to be truly alive, truly connected to the natural world, and to the fundamental peace that lay at the heart of existence. As Marcus soaked in these blessed waters, surrounded by the living presence of the ancient trees and supported by the earth's own healing energy, he felt himself undergoing a transformation that was both subtle and profound. The stress and anxiety that had driven him to seek these healing springs were not just being relieved, but were being replaced by something infinitely more valuable, a deep, abiding sense of connection to the source of all healing and renewal. In the sacred grove, Marcus was discovering that true true restoration was not about returning to a previous state, but about evolving into something entirely new, something more whole and integrated than he had ever been before. As the morning progressed and the sun climbed higher in the sky, filling the grove with warm, golden light that seemed to bless every leaf and every drop of thermal water, Marcus felt a profound gratitude rising within him. The sacred grove was revealing itself to be not just a place of healing, but a temple of renewal, where the earth itself offered its gifts of transformation to anyone wise enough to receive them with reverence and trust. Chapter 10: The Imperial Bath of Serenity. As the sun reached its zenith and filled the thermal springs complex with warm, golden light, Marcus felt called to experience the crown jewel of the ancient sanctuary, the Imperial Bath of Serenity. This magnificent pool had been constructed for the personal use of emperors and their most honored guests, representing the absolute pinnacle of Roman engineering and artistic achievement in the service of healing and restoration. The approach to the Imperial Bath was itself a journey of preparation and purification. Marcus followed a marble pathway that wound through carefully tended gardens where roses bloomed in abundance, their petals scattered by gentle breezes across the warm stone. The path was lined with statues of healing deities and water nymphs, each carved from the finest marble and positioned to guide visitors into an increasingly reverent and peaceful state of mind. The entrance to the Imperial Bath was marked by a magnificent portico supported by columns of purple porphyry, the rarest and most precious stone available to ancient Roman architects. These columns seemed to glow with their own inner light. Their deep purple color shot through with crystalline veins that caught and reflected the sunlight in patterns of extraordinary beauty. Between the columns, arched openings framed views of the bath beyond, creating a sense of anticipation and wonder that prepared visitors for the transcendent experience that awaited them. As Marcus passed through this imperial entrance, he felt the weight of history surrounding him. These same columns had welcomed emperors seeking respite from the burdens of ruling the known world. Marcus Aurelius himself, the philosopher-emperor, had found in these waters the peace necessary to write his meditations on virtue and wisdom. Hadrian had soaked in these thermal pools between his journeys to the far corners of the empire, restoring his strength for the challenges of leadership and expansion. The Imperial Bath itself was a marvel of engineering and artistry that took Marcus's breath away. The pool was enormous, capable of accommodating dozens of bathers without any sense of crowding. Yet it had been designed with such perfect proportions that it felt intimate and welcoming rather than imposing or overwhelming. The marble used in its construction was of the highest quality, pure white Carrara marble veined with gold, creating a surface that seemed to glow with inner radiance. The pool's design incorporated multiple levels and seating areas, each carefully positioned to take advantage of different thermal currents and mineral concentrations. The deepest sections were perfect for complete immersion and floating meditation, while shallow areas allowed for comfortable reclining and conversation. Built-in seating followed the natural curves of the human body so precisely that sitting in the Imperial Bath felt like being embraced by the earth itself. The thermal springs that fed the Imperial Bath emerged from a sacred grotto carved into the hillside behind the pool. This grotto was decorated with mosaics depicting Neptune and his court of sea deities, their forms rendered in tiny tesserae of gold and lapis, lazuli that sparkled in the light reflected from the water's surface. The springs bubbled forth from this divine setting with a gentle, rhythmic pulsing that seemed to echo the heartbeat of the gods themselves. The water in the Imperial Bath was the most perfectly mineralized in the entire complex, fed by the deepest and most ancient springs. It contained a concentration of healing minerals that had been optimized over centuries of careful observation and adjustment. The emperors who had commissioned this bath had demanded nothing less than perfection, and their engineers had achieved it by directing the flows from multiple thermal sources to create a natural blend of extraordinary therapeutic power. As Marcus descended the marble steps into the Imperial Bath, he felt the water embrace him with a silky smoothness that spoke of its exceptional mineral content. The temperature was perfectly calibrated to promote the deepest possible relaxation while maintaining the energizing properties that made extended soaking not just comfortable, but actively rejuvenating. The water seemed to caress his skin with an almost conscious gentleness, as if it possessed its own intelligence and desire to heal. The acoustic properties of the Imperial Bath were remarkable. The perfect proportions of the space created natural resonance chambers that enhanced the therapeutic sounds of flowing water while filtering out any harsh or disturbing noises. The thermal springs created a complex symphony of liquid music, bubbling, flowing, cascading sounds that wove together into patterns of extraordinary beauty and tranquility. Marcus found a comfortable position in one of the built-in seats and allowed himself to sink completely into the imperial experience. The marble beneath him was warm and smooth, heated by thermal currents that flowed through channels carved deep within the stone. The water supported his body with perfect buoyancy, allowing him to float in a state of weightless peace that felt like being cradled in the arms of the earth itself. The visual splendor of the Imperial Bath was as healing as its physical properties. The walls were decorated with frescoes depicting scenes of natural beauty, peaceful landscapes, flowing rivers, blooming gardens, all rendered in colors that remained vivid despite their great age. These images seemed to transport viewers to realms of perfect peace and harmony, supporting the mental and emotional healing that was taking place alongside the physical restoration. Above the bath, the ceiling was painted to represent the heavens, with gold stars scattered across a deep blue field that seemed to extend infinitely upward. This celestial dome created the impression of bathing beneath the actual sky, connecting the earthly healing of the thermal springs with the cosmic forces that governed the movements of planets and stars. The effect was both grounding and transcendent, helping bathers feel their place in the larger order of the universe. As the afternoon progressed, Marcus began to understand why emperors had been drawn to this particular bath above all others in their vast empire. The Imperial Bath offered not just superior physical comfort, but a complete experience of restoration that addressed every aspect of human need. Here, the most powerful rulers in the world had found the peace and renewal necessary to carry the enormous responsibilities of leadership with wisdom and grace. The mineral content of the water in the Imperial Bath was particularly rich in elements that supported mental clarity and emotional equilibrium. Gold particles dissolved in minute quantities from the veined marble added their own subtle therapeutic properties, while rare earth elements enhanced the water's capacity to promote cellular regeneration and immune system function. Marcus felt his consciousness expanding as he soaked in these imperial waters. The combination of perfect physical comfort, extraordinary visual beauty, and optimal mineral therapy created conditions that were ideal for the kind of profound inner transformation that the greatest emperors had sought in this sacred place. He began to understand that true imperial power came not from conquest or domination, but from the inner peace and wisdom that could only be achieved through deep connection with the healing forces of the natural world. Other visitors to the Imperial Bath moved with the same reverent awareness that Marcus felt. Even though the bath was no longer reserved for emperors alone, everyone who entered seemed to understand that they were participating in something extraordinary, something that connected them to the great tradition of leadership through wisdom and inner strength that had characterized Rome at its finest. As the sun began its descent toward the western horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose that reflected perfectly in the still sections of the Imperial Bath. Marcus felt a profound transformation taking place within him. The healing journey that had begun with his arrival at the thermal springs was reaching a crescendo of restoration and renewal that touched every aspect of his being. In the Imperial Bath of Serenity, Marcus was discovering not just physical healing, but a fundamental reorientation of his relationship to power, responsibility, and leadership in his own life. Like the emperors who had soaked in these same waters before him, he was learning that true strength came not from struggle and strain, but from deep connection to the inexhaustible sources of renewal that the earth offered to all who approached them with humility and reverence. The Imperial Bath was revealing itself to be the perfect culmination of his healing journey, a place where the ultimate refinement of human engineering and artistry had been combined with the earth's most precious gifts to create an environment where transformation was not just possible, but inevitable. As Marcus floated in these blessed waters, surrounded by the accumulated peace and wisdom of centuries, he felt himself becoming whole in ways he had never imagined possible. Epilogue, the eternal return. As the stars emerged in the darkening sky above the thermal springs, marking the completion of Marcus's first full cycle of healing in this sacred place, he found himself changed in ways that seemed both profound and subtly natural. The transformation that had taken place within him felt less like a dramatic alteration and more like a return to his true nature, as if the healing waters had not added something foreign to his being, but had simply washed away everything that had obscured his authentic self. Rising slowly from the Imperial Bath for the final time, Marcus moved with a grace and fluidity that had become second nature during his time at the springs. His body felt not just relaxed, but perfectly integrated, each muscle and joint working in harmony with all the others to create movements that were both efficient and beautiful. The chronic tension that had driven him to seek healing had not just been relieved, but had been replaced by a new default state of ease and comfort that felt sustainable and permanent. As he wrapped himself in the soft linen robe and began the gentle journey back through the various areas of the thermal complex, Marcus realized that he was seeing everything with new eyes. The same marble pathways, oil lamps, and thermal pools that had welcomed him with their beauty upon arrival now revealed additional layers of meaning and significance. He understood that this place was not just a healing center, but a teacher, offering lessons about the nature of restoration and renewal that could be applied to every aspect of life. The companions in healing whom he had encountered during his journey, each offered their own quiet farewells as he passed. Livia, the elderly woman whose peaceful presence had enhanced his own relaxation, smiled at him with eyes that seemed to hold the wisdom of countless healing journeys. Felix, the young man who had arrived carrying intense mental exhaustion, now moved with the same fluid grace that Marcus felt within himself. Proof that the spring's healing power was available to all who approached them with genuine need and open hearts. The sacred grove where ancient trees intertwined their roots with thermal springs held a special farewell gift for Marcus. As he paused beneath the great oak that had become such a powerful symbol of endurance and renewal, he felt the tree's ancient presence blessing his departure and ensuring that the peace he had found would travel with him wherever he went. The mineral-rich waters that flowed around the tree's roots seemed to whisper promises that the healing he had received was not temporary, but had become part of his essential nature. The garden of healing vapors offered its own form of blessing as Marcus walked slowly along paths now familiar and beloved. The aromatic plants released their fragrances into the night air with particular intensity, as if they too were participating in his send-off ceremony. Lavender, rosemary, chamomile, and sage combined their essences to create a natural perfume that Marcus breathed deeply, knowing that these healing fragrances would forever be associated in his memory with the profound transformation he had experienced as he approached the simple stone arch that marked the entrance to the thermal springs complex. Marcus paused to look back at the sacred landscape that had given him such precious gifts. The pools glowed softly in the starlight, their thermal vapors rising like prayers into the clear night sky. The marble architecture seemed to pulse gently with its own inner light, radiating the accumulated peace and healing of centuries. But Marcus understood that his relationship with this place was not ending, but evolving. The healing he had received here had revealed to him that peace and renewal were not destinations to be reached, but qualities of being that could be accessed anywhere, at any time, by anyone who had learned the secret of connecting with the inexhaustible sources of restoration that existed both within the self and throughout the natural world. The thermal springs had taught him that healing was not about returning to a previous state, but about discovering new possibilities for wholeness and integration. The mineral waters had shown him that the earth itself was a source of medicine and wisdom, constantly offering its gifts to support the health and well-being of all living beings. The ancient architecture had demonstrated that human creativity and natural healing power could work together to create environments where transformation was not just possible, but inevitable. As Marcus stepped through the stone arch and began his journey back toward the world beyond the thermal springs, he carried with him more than just memories of a pleasant interlude. He carried a new understanding of what it meant to live in harmony with the deeper rhythms of life, a practical knowledge of how to access states of peace and renewal in the midst of any circumstances, and a deep trust in the healing wisdom that existed within his own being. The path that led away from the thermal springs was the same one he had followed upon arrival. But Marcus found himself experiencing it in an entirely different way, where before he had walked with urgency and anxiety, driven by desperation to find relief from his suffering. Now, he moved with the unhurried pace of someone who had all the time in the world, where before the landscape had been merely a backdrop to his internal struggle. Now, he saw it as a living expression of the same healing principles he had encountered at the springs. The olive groves and vineyards that bordered the path seemed to glow with their own inner peace, their leaves rustling in the night breeze with sounds that echoed the therapeutic waters he had left behind. The cypress trees that lined the roadway stood like silent guardians, their dark forms reaching toward the star-filled sky in gestures of natural prayer and aspiration. As Marcus walked through the night toward the distant lights of Rome, he began to understand that his healing journey was not ending, but beginning. The thermal springs had not been an escape from life, but a preparation for living with greater wisdom, compassion, and inner strength. The peace he had found there was not a temporary respite, but a permanent addition to his repertoire of inner resources, something he could access and share regardless of external circumstances. The city that awaited his return would present the same challenges and demands that had driven him to seek healing in the first place. But Marcus knew that he would meet these challenges from a fundamentally different place within himself. The thermal springs had shown him that true strength came not from fighting against difficulties, but from maintaining connection to the deep sources of renewal that were always available to those who knew how to access them. As dawn began to touch the eastern horizon, painting the sky in soft pastels that reminded Marcus of the gentle light that had illuminated the thermal pools, he felt a profound gratitude rising within him. The gratitude was not just for the healing he had received, but for the discovery that such healing was always possible, that the earth and the human spirit contained inexhaustible resources for renewal and transformation. The thermal springs of ancient Rome had revealed themselves to be more than a destination. They were a doorway to a way of being that honored both the need for deep rest and the call to engaged living. In their mineral-rich waters, Marcus had discovered not just relief from his immediate suffering, but a template for how to live with greater peace, wisdom, and connection to the fundamental forces that supported all life. As he walked toward the rising sun, carrying the gifts of the thermal springs within his transformed being, Marcus understood that he had become part of an ancient lineage of seekers who had found in these sacred waters not just healing, but a path to the deepest truths of human existence. The springs would continue to offer their gifts to future generations of tired souls seeking restoration, just as they had for countless centuries past. And in the quiet moments of each day that followed, wherever he found himself, Marcus would be able to close his eyes and return in memory and spirit to the thermal springs of ancient Rome, where the earth's own healing waters flowed eternally, offering their gifts of peace and renewal to all who approached them with reverence, trust, and an open heart. The healing was complete, but it was also eternal, a spring of restoration that would never run dry, a source of peace that would always be available, a sanctuary of the spirit that could be accessed whenever the need for deep renewal arose. In this way, the thermal springs lived on not just as a place, but as a state of being, not just as a memory, but as a living reality that transformed every moment with its presence, offering to all who had experienced its gifts the possibility of carrying that same healing peace into every corner of the world that needed its blessing.